So we're heading down to cut some brush, and I found something fairly interesting right here. The DC releases pheasants, and as you know, in the past videos we've had a couple pheasants that migrated their way up here from the valley down there. Yeah, down there. And they've been hanging out here all fall, all winter. But I think one met his demise. Let me show you. He has feathers all over. Oh my. Look at that. I think he's either missing some tail feathers or he's a goner. I don't see any carcass around, but there sure is a lot of feathers. He lost part of his tail. Now, maybe he got away. I don't know. We're gonna look around. It could have been anything that got him. I don't see anything but parts of his tail feather. Now, there's a possibility that the fox got a hold of him, grabbed his tail as he was being chased, and ripped his tail feathers out, because that's really all I see. I don't see anything to indicate that his carcass is around here other than all his tail feathers. We'll see. Maybe we'll see him and he'll be tailless. I don't know. All right, we're gonna go cut some brush. Well, it's a beautiful day. Second week in February, and it's gonna be almost 50 degrees today. I love it. The biggest problem that we have with warmer temperatures this time of year is things start to get muddy, and because we're on a hill, we have to be very mindful of that we don't rut our trails up because it's on a hill. Water runs downhill and we start to have erosion problems. So it's in the morning, things are still somewhat froze up. We're gonna start cutting some brush or some invasives. We got autumn olive, we got Bradford pear. Got to cut some of that out. So as we cut the invasives out, and they become a monoculture of plants like the autumn olive, and we cut out all the gray dogwood. The gray dogwood isn't an invasive species, but it can become a monoculture, and what happens is nothing grows underneath it. Doesn't really serve much of a purpose. I do lease some of that, but where it's basically monopolizing the ground, we will take it out. We have the Bradford pear, the autumn olive, the thorn apple. We like to get rid of the thorn apple. We leave some of those because they do produce an apple that is good for wildlife. But it can become a monoculture as well. It can dominate an area. So we're trying to get rid of that. And I'm going to show you an area over here that had some grass in it. And honestly, I don't know what kind of grass it is, so maybe someone can tell me. But it was just a small area of grass in this hillside here that was just dominated by gray dogwood, autumn olive, thorn apple that I've cleared out over the last couple of years. It's not a very big area, but as we clear it out, that grass has become more dominant. So if someone in the comments can tell me what kind of grass this is, I'd be truly appreciative. You can see that our switchgrass, and that's cave and rock switchgrass, is coming quite well. We've actually cut some of it back to open up our food plot. We have a food plot right in the middle of this switchgrass, and the cave and rock, I planted it quite wide initially, knowing that I would probably cut it back some. So last fall we sprayed the perimeter of the inside of this switchgrass to open it up for a bigger food plot. But the switchgrass is doing well. Our food plots didn't fare too well last year. We've prepared a lot of ground for food plots for this spring, and we're going to frost seed them here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Hopefully by the end of February we'll have frost seeded them to clover, and hopefully that clover will establish, and we'll probably take and plant some of those clover fields or those frost seeded fields to we'll plant them in the spring for a summer food plot, and then we'll overplant those in the fall for our fall food plots. And that seems to be a good way of doing it. Our ground is really clay. It's a heavy clay, not much topsoil, usually wet, so it's either too wet or it's too dry. So it's difficult to get anything to grow. When we initially opened these areas up and planted them, the food plots did great, but that was for 1 year. I think what happened is there was a lot of nutrients, or there were some nutrients in that top layer of soil, and our first food plot depleted those nutrients, and now ever since our food plots have not grown very well. So it looks like I'll probably have to start fertilizing. I don't like to use fertilizer, especially now that it's really expensive. So this whole area, and when we started it was maybe a 10 by 10 foot small area that had this grass. But as we've cleared this out, and I came back in a couple days ago and cut some of this autumn olive that's been sprouting back up. And you can see the brushes around here. But we've opened it up, and this grass has been expanding. And I don't know what kind of grass it is. You can see it's a very yellow grass. I've tried to identify it, but I'm not that good at identifying grasses. But if someone could tell me what this is and whether it's a good thing or not, I'd appreciate it. I know the deer come in here and they do bed in it, so we'll probably leave it. I don't know what it is. So anyways, if someone can tell me what this is, that would be awesome. So we have a white oak here, but it's, or it was, getting wrapped around with the Oriental Bittersweet, which is another thing that we have that's starting to show up on our property. Oriental Bittersweet is some people love it, some people hate it. Some people like it because they can use it for decorations. It has an orange berry on it, and people use the vines with the orange berries for a fall decoration. But out here, it's not a very good thing to have, and I'll show you. It wraps around trees, and as the vine gets bigger, it starts to choke out that tree, and it will kill them. And this is a prime example. This beautiful white oak that I've been cutting everything around it to release it or open it up. This last year had some bittersweet start climbing up, so I just cut it all out, and it was starting to cut into the bark. So one of the things I'm going to do, because it's winter time, everything's very visible. In the summertime, when everything's so green, this stuff's not very easy to see down in the brush. So I'm going to flag this bittersweet because I know there's a whole bunch of it right here, and it came and climbed up this tree. I'm going to flag it, and then as it starts to green up in the spring, I'm going to come down and spray it with some 2,4-D or some glyphosate to try to knock it back. And I've noticed this stuff in different parts of the property. So as we cut around trees and we cut the autumn olive and we cut the thorn apple, we're going to be looking for that bittersweet, Oriental Bittersweet, and cutting it back and flagging it so we can come in and spray it in the spring when it starts to green up. So you can see how this bittersweet just wraps around things. It's pretty wild. We don't like it. So another beneficial plant that we're leaving is this serviceberry. We have these scattered throughout the hillside, and so we leave this. We try to trim around it. A lot of them is covered up in the autumn olive and the gray dogwood, so we're trimming around them, releasing them so they can grow a little bit hardier, and it makes a big difference. You'll see in a couple of years what releasing a tree will do, or releasing a shrub that you like, getting all the stuff away from it, letting it use all the nutrients that are around it rather than all the brush. So we try to leave the service berries when we can. There's another plant right here that we leave. Let me show you. This is a high bush blueberry, and it produces a very small blueberry, and we never get to pick them because the birds get to them, but I guess that's what we leave them for, is the wildlife. But they're also scattered throughout here, and we try to leave those. We cut all the brush from around them, and they like this soil, so we've got quite a few of them scattered around here. Another reason I like to cut this time of year is because of our poison ivy. There's poison ivy all over in here, and I have a love-hate relationship with poison ivy. I love to hate it. Right now, there isn't any leaves, obviously, but there's still the stems. But that's all I got to worry about, is the stems. And when I'm cutting close to the ground, and I know that I'm getting into the some of that poison ivy stem that's sticking up. So I never touch the end of this, because I've gotten some of the worst poison ivy's rashes in my life in the winter time, because you don't think about it, but I think about it now. Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with poison ivy. I love to hate it. So you can see this this switchgrass, which is a cave and rock variety, has done pretty well. It gets up probably over 6 foot in some areas 5 foot, but it holds up pretty good in this climate with the snow loads that we get. Although this year we didn't get a lot of snow, so I didn't plant this necessarily for bedding. I planted it for screening cover. Screening cover for me when I come in to hunt, and also screening cover for the deer. If a buck comes into one side of the property, he's not able to look all the way across. Our property's probably 200 yards wide, and if they came in from one side, all I gotta do is poke their head into here and look all the way across, see there's no does, and then be on their merry way. But having this cave and rock switchgrass, breaking the field into smaller sections, it forces a deer to walk around and explore a little bit. You know, to get into the food plot here, I got a small food plot here, small food plot over there, and it forces a deer to go in certain areas that I want them to go, not to just be hanging out way on the other side of the field where I can't have a chance to harvest them. And it's worked out pretty good. So besides the gray dogwood, we also have this red osier dogwood, and I leave every red osier dogwood that I can, because this is a preferred browse in the wintertime for deer, and you can see on these where they have been browsing this. But what I will do is I will cut this down to within a foot of the ground when it gets real long and leggy, and it sprouts back up. And you can see on this one where I cut it down, oh, I think 2 years ago I cut it down, but it's grown right back up, and the deer love to browse on these little tender ends of this red osier dogwood. So when I'm cutting small brush, I like to have my chain tensioned a little bit tighter. It's nothing worse than be cutting through brush, and because your chain has gotten loose or your chain is too loose, it pops off track and starts mucking things up. So when I'm cutting this small brush and poking my saw in that little stuff, I like my chain a little bit tighter. So what we normally do is we'll pick a small area to trim, quarter acre or less. And this area right here is the one that I decided, sitting in my tree stand this fall, that we were going to do some work on. So we've got some autumn olive in here. We've got some high bush blueberry, and we're going to leave those obviously. We got some serviceberry, but we also have these big clumps of autumn olive, which we're going to get rid of, cut them down. One of the problems with autumn olive is that it will sprout right back up, so we'll cut it down. The bigger ones we don't have to mark because we can see the trunks, but I'll come in here again with the glyphosate or a 2,4-D and spray these as they green up, and that seems to knock them back pretty good. If you let them go, if you don't spray them, they just bush right back out, and in 2 years you've got autumn olive 4 or 5 foot tall again. So we'll go in here, we'll cut these big ones out, and then we'll come in the spring, early summer, and spray them, knock them down. Let's get that out of the way. Sometimes you just got to cut your way in to get the chainsaw. Well, to be honest with you, there's no beautiful before and after pictures. It actually gets ugly before it gets better. So we left these up a little bit high. They're mostly dead. I'll come in and spray them again. And then maybe we'll bring the bush hog in here and break all this stuff down this summer. Like I said, there's no beautiful after pictures because it looks pretty ugly. It takes a couple years for this to look better. And we'll come in here, like I said, bush hog all this brush up, knock it down, and 2 years from now it'll look nice. So the hope is that someday in the near future we have a pond in right here. We have a drainage that runs down, drains this whole hillside basically into this one little area, and our watering hole's right there, stays full most of the year. So if we could put like an 1/8 or 1/4 acre pond right here behind me, that would be great, and I think we're going to do that. It's a perfect spot for one, and the clay holds water pretty good, so it shouldn't be too hard to do. We just got to find the right person to do it. Well, I'm always real anxious to get down here when we got nice weather, especially in the spring. But let me tell you a story. This is what happened to me 2 years ago. Had my old Ford 8N, and I was really anxious to get down here and do some bush hogging. So the first nice day we had, there was still some snow on the ground, but I had used my ATV to plow the path down over the hill and keep it open. It was a nice day. Everything was frozen solid, and I decided perfect time to come down with the tractor. The fields were open, no snow on the fields, a little bit of snow where I'd plowed it up on each side of the trail coming down. And I decided I was going to bring the tractor and the bush hog down and get some early bush hogging done. I started over the hill and I got to the first little steep spot in the trail, and the ground was frozen all right. It was like ice. And I started sliding down the hill with my tractor, 4.8N, and the bush hog. The only way I could stop it was to drive it into like the 1.5 foot frozen snowbank on the side of the trail. It spun sideways and I came to a stop. If I had gone 40 yards further, I would have been on the steepest part of the hill and there would have been no stopping. So that taught me a pretty important lesson. I just got to cool my jets a little bit, wait for the ground to be dry and hard before I bring my tractor down. Even when it's wet, the hill's steep enough where that little tractor will start to slide. So I don't do that anymore. I wait for late spring, early summer, when everything's good and dry, before I bring my tractor down. It was a lesson learned. I'll never do that again. The flowers?
Yeah, that was so pretty that first one year. Where that tree stump is right there now?
Yeah.
Is that another place you think for a tent or whatever?
No. I think right where the commander is. Yeah.
Maybe I'll have coffee. Yeah, we don't have French vanilla here.
We got the cream.
The hazelnut. Could set this through. That one came out.